And happy Monday, everybody. We're hoping you're having a wonderful start to your week. Welcome to the first ever Around the Apple podcast, brought to you by Elite Sports New York. The call-in number is 929-477-1662. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Around the Apple and like our Facebook page. I'm your co-host, Christian Kouroupakis, along with my partner, Emmanuel Berbari. Emmanuel, how's it going, my man?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm happy to get this started first and foremost, but I'm doing well. I know you out there at Penn State, your football team is doing even better, and as I understand it, after that huge upset against Ohio State, there were some riots going on.
Actually, I was preparing for this show. I was going to start talking about how badly Penn State was slaughtered by them. But instead, I found myself in the middle of a riot on Beaver Avenue, thanks to one of the biggest upsets I've ever seen, which I never truly understood. You got a big win and that you didn't expect to have. So let's go burn down some trees and break light posts. That makes sense. Welcome to the college atmosphere. Speaking of riots, I wanted to kick off the show by talking about Josh Brown and this garbage situation the Giants and the NFL have thrown themselves into. Now, I'm just going to provide some context before you and I give our take on it. We know he was suspended for week 1 of this season for his domestic violence arrest in Washington back in 2015. At that time, his now ex-wife Brown told police that Brown had been physically violent with her more than 20 times. In the wake of all this information flooding in, and the Giants knew that Brown had a domestic violence history, the Giants re-signed him to a 2-year extension after his suspension, while owner John Mara made it crystal clear that Brown would only be cut from the team for football reasons. Now, as of Wednesday, new documents were released by King County Sheriff's Office, quotes from Brown saying that he physically and emotionally abused his wife, photographs of his wife covered in bruises, and a surplus of examples of Brown's abuse. It was tough to read. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to quote anything right now because it's really tough to read and repeat. But first off, the only thing the Giants and the NFL knew was that he was charged with King County Sheriff's Office, I mean, as far as we know, with domestic violence of the 4th degree without acknowledgement of these documents, as far as we know. Those documents were just released on Wednesday. But here's where I have a serious problem. The Giants, at the very least, knew that Brown had 2 domestic violence incidents, one being in the Pro Bowl and one being the arrest back in 2015, and still gave him an extension. The NFL didn't do their job to the full extent in obtaining these documents, which were available if they actually shown effort and gotten the documents. And at this moment, Brown is on a paid leave on the commissioner's exempt list, has received 5 game checks, an increase in pay for $500,000 with his new contract that he got again after the suspension. And this is also right after both Ray Rice, Greg Hardy, and Adrian Peterson, and created the NFL is no place for domestic violence, I guess you can call it a slogan, and they created their immediate 6-game suspension policy for first-time offenders. I understand Brown's career is shot, and it may even be over, but that's not the point. When the policy was instituted, Emmanuel, you and I, and every fan, player, reporter, cheerleader, I don't care who you are, hope that the next time one of these evil acts of domestic violence reared its ugly head, that would be smashed. I don't know, but I guess it's our fault for thinking that the National Football League would get something right. Roger Goodell showed that once again, loose cannons in his league can apparently do whatever they want with a mere slap on the wrist, and in this case, get rewarded for it. Now, I'm going to give you the floor, Emmanuel, but this gets a little better. In the wake of the documents being released, John Mara, who apparently represents an organization of class and professionalism, had this to say on Thursday on Mike Francesa's show.
And we were obviously disturbed by it, but based on what we knew, and particularly based on this young man's attempt to try to rehabilitate himself, which I still believe he is trying to do, and he's made a good faith effort to do that as far as I know. We were comfortable with the decision to continue to employ him. I can't answer right now what the future holds for him. I think we need to gather some more information and then try to make as intelligent a decision as we can. He's admitted to us that he's abused his wife in the past, and I think what's a little unclear is the extent of that.
Emmanuel, the floor is yours. My head is in 9 different areas of rage.
And rightfully so. I don't think you missed on anything, and I think what you said and the way you described it was the proper way to describe it. This is wrong on so many fronts. First with the NFL, and we'll get to that in a little bit, which it's become a joke that they haven't put the hammer down, and with all these situations, we've been naive. Us as fans, no matter who you are, we've been naive to think that the next guy that made these women victims was going to get some sort of repercussions other than what we've seen. So there's number one. Number two, the Giants. And the clip you just played is atrocious. It's just atrocious. You hear John Mara saying that they were comfortable to employ him. They were comfortable enough to employ him. And yes, that he did do that stuff to his wife. So the fact that it was even covered up in the slightest, and we're saying as far as we know on so many different occasions, you have to even jump to the conclusion that the Giants know more than we know. I'm going to read this from a NewJersey.com article that I was reading prior to going on the air, and this describes the 2015 incident. It goes, quote, "While they were sitting in bed with their backs against the headboard but looking at each other talking, Josh jumped on bed in a standing position over her, which scared Molly. Molly quickly scrambled out of bed to get away from Josh. Josh jumped out of bed and came at Molly. Josh grabbed Molly and slammed her into a large mirror with a very large frame around it that they have hanging on their bedroom wall. The back of Molly's head and left arm hit the side of the mirror and frame." I'll stop it right there. I don't need to read the rest of the quote. This is just awful. And the fact that the NFL didn't do more, the fact that the Giants employed him, as John Mara would like to put it, is disgraceful. They gave him a 2-year deal in lieu of all this, even the Pro Bowl incident last year, where they had to secretly move the wife and kids to a separate floor. The fact that the NFL didn't step in more, the fact that the Giants even took the action of making him the kicker for this year when his career is clearly going down the drain, I just think that is ridiculous. And, you know, Christian, I usually like to debate on a podcast like this, but there's no room for debate here. The NFL should have a zero-tolerance policy with stuff like this, and they don't. And the domestic violence issue could not be in an unclearer state.
Could not agree more. It's disgusting.
It really is. And, you know, we could sit here and talk for 30 minutes about this, and we could talk about how disgusting this is for 30 minutes, and I could do it all day long, because this needs to be addressed. And the fact that the NFL should have a zero tolerance policy, and they're handing out paychecks, the Giants are handing out paychecks to a person who abuses women, regardless of if it's his wife, his daughter, you name it, he's abusing women. It's ridiculous. But let's flip the page, because we could just get riled up here, and with no purpose. There needs to be something done about this, and who knows what will get done. These people are looked up to, and there's nothing done about it. Let's move on to our second topic of the day. Once again, you're listening to Around the Apple, Episode 1 with I'm Emmanuel Berbari, along with Christian Kouroupakis, who's back there in Pennsylvania. The Yankees, their off-season, we like to get to this. We're both Yankee guys. And we were talking before this started. We wanted to address something with a little bit more spice to it, give you rather than what you're all hearing. Who should the Yankees trade this offseason? Because, Christian, I know you can agree with this, and you'll tell me if you do. This free agent market is basically as thin as it's ever been. It really is.
Oh, it's atrocious.
It's atrocious. It's really bad. And usually you see some sort of light in these free agent markets. There's none this year. You wouldn't expect the Yankees to make any improvements by way of that. You'd expect them to make slight improvements in the free agent market, but they could make improvements by making some bold moves with the current guys on their 25-man roster. I'm going to be bold here, and I'm going to make you a proposition. If the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I'm not saying this would happen because it might be a little preposterous, if the Los Angeles Dodgers called you tomorrow, if you're Brian Cashman, and said, hey, we're looking to deal Clayton Kershaw. He's making the team look bad. He's causing problems in the clubhouse, and we're looking to deal him. We want Gary Sanchez. Would you pull the trigger? Now, I've been one that said the Yankees should at least entertain offers. They don't have to pull the trigger and deal him, but they should at least entertain offers. But I think a good way to judge this is if the Dodgers offered you Kershaw, do you swap Gary Sanchez? I think they should. I think Gary Sanchez's second half this year was a little over his head. We saw what he was able to do in the minors, and I think he'll be a great major league player. But I think that's the point right now. He's not going to get any hotter than he was in the second half this year. You need entertainment, and if I'm the Yankees and I'm offered that deal, I do it.
I'm just going to shout out for this one. For one, I don't think you can wheel in that Kershaw, Trout-esque player without sending others with Sanchez out of New York. Because like you just said, there is risk with him. You can say he was over his head. Even now, not paying as a superstar. Yes, what he showed us in August were his capabilities, which seem to have seduced not only the Yankees fans, but the rest of Major League Baseball. But he's still young, raw, unproven in regards to longevity. Other teams would take that into consideration before accepting any superstar for him straight up, especially Clayton Kershaw. Now, the part where I think you've got is the fact that up until this season, the Yankees organization has bitten the bait on, quote, superstars, because, again, spending spree 2014 hasn't exactly panned out. That has changed. If it didn't change, then Miller and Chapman wouldn't be in the World Series right now. That's not the point. The point is Sanchez, who is greater than anything we've seen since the 1930s, is a literal representation on how bright the future is of this Yankees organization. With every growing star, you take skills against everyone, with the Jeters, with the Moes, with the Pettis. Sanchez somehow pulled a mediocre Yankees team into contention. Imagine what happens when Greg Bird's batting behind him. Imagine if Aaron Judge figures things out. Imagine what that lineup would look like, or if he had to be part of a not-so-mediocre team. That's a core of talent, and that can not only light it up for years to come, but that was in the making for quite some time. I think the Yankees would be playing with fire to even think about dealing him. They would be gambling the bright future they've worked so hard to establish, and a deal would just continue the endless cycle of trying to buy your team a little prematurely.
Christian, I understand what you're saying, and I definitely respect it. And you can't deny what Sanchez did in the second half, and it's part of my point. He took a mediocre Yankee team that just performed a deadline fire sale in order to bolster their future for years to come, and he turned them into a playoff contender in a year that you could technically call a rebuild in the second half after the overhaul. Now, with that comes expectations are through the roof. What are real expectations for Gary Sanchez next year? And I wouldn't go as far to say they're any higher than he was as a player coming up from the minors. If you take his second half, you would expect a guy that's going to hit north of 40 home runs and drive in 120 runs, which would be absolutely absurd for a guy who's playing almost every single day behind the plate. Now, here's my point. If you deal Sanchez and you have a guy like Austin Romine to be your backup catcher, you still have a guy like Brian McCann who's a seasoned veteran and can handle everyday catching duties. If you're able to wheel in a top-flight starting pitcher for Sanchez, maybe you package in one other mid-tier minor leaguer, and you somehow rip off a team into giving you a top-flight starting pitcher, which we know is what the Yankees need to be a serious contender in the American League East in 2017. I think that's when you do it, because you have this core of talent. You have Greg Bird to bat in the middle of the lineup. You have Aaron Judge, who's been known for adjustments, and you expect him to make those adjustments next year. You have that youthful middle of the infield with Starlin Castro and Didi Gregorius. And you have some areas of stability right now. But if you're able to wheel in that top-flight starting pitcher, you're an instant contender. And that's where I draw the line and say, hey, if we get a deal we like, we have guys to fill that plug, and we can move forth as a contender next year.
But do you think an extra pitcher would make this Yankees team contend more right now? I mean, you look at their rankings, and they led the league in strikeout per 9, but their offense second to last in average with runners in scoring position. That's the reason why they didn't win. They didn't win because of their starting pitching. They didn't hit.
Yeah, well, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that was the case at all in the second half, and I don't have the exact splits in front of me, but
neither do I.
the offense and the situational hitting, you can say vastly improved in the second half. The problem with the Yankees, because of Sanchez, you're right. But that's not to say they won't score runs next year, and it's not to say that he's more valuable than what a top-flight starting pitcher can do, shifting Masahiro Tanaka, a guy who was a top pitcher in the American League, into a more comfortable number 2 spot in the rotation. You have CC Sabathia, who, quite frankly, no one expected to be good last year, but he's shown that with age, he can kind of finesse himself now and be a number 3 or 4 starter on the big league stage. I like Brian Mitchell, and then you fill in the plugs from there. Yeah, Luis Sessa showed he can pitch on the big league level. I just don't want the Yankees to be in a position where they're wheeling Tanaka out there. I have no problem with Tanaka as the number one, but when he's the number one, there are question mark behind him. If you move him back, the rotation becomes all the more dynamic. I think it's a rotation that can actually have you contending legitimately at the end of the season.
I'll give you something. The Yankees. This is exactly what the Yankees thought when they traded Montero for Pineda, and Montero fell off the face of the earth. But what the monstrosity he brought to the Yankees last year, it gave fans hope that a mediocre team could actually make the playoffs. It gave the franchise hope that the future was in better hands, and it's just absolutely unprecedented. And you just don't deal a player of that type of caliber at this stage of the game. That's just how I feel.
I understand what you're saying, and you're right. He did bring the fan base to its feet, gave it that reeking sense of optimism. That's why, and I was being bold with this, you only entertain it if you get a deal that absolutely makes you fall out of your chair. And that's what I'm saying. If the Yankees don't get something they like, there's going to be backlash from a deal like that. So if you get something that absolutely makes you fall out of your chair, that's when you entertain it, and that's when you actually think about doing the unthinkable. And I'll leave it at that. All
right, yeah, so let's hop out of this. We're kind of ranting over here. The Jets have found themselves in yet another sticky quarterback situation. Fitzpatrick played like trash on primetime in Arizona, and even before that was benched for Geno Smith. Geno Smith goes down, then Fitz leads the Jets to his second win of the year. Now, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL.com, initial MRIs on Smith's knee shows that he has suffered a torn ACL. Now, Emmanuel, before you and I go ahead and discuss this, I want to take the time to introduce ATA's first guest. Boy, is it a good one. He's MSG and NBC. He's also a reporter, anchor, and manager of the Kings Park Knights baseball team, and my former baseball coach, Glenn Petritis. Coach Glenn, how's it going?
Great, but I'm going to kill EB right off the bat. Are you kidding me? You're not trading Sanchez. I know that, guys, first off, congratulations on your first show. Congratulations on your show.
Thank you.
It is awesome. I tuned in right off the bat. EB, I'm ready to rip my arm off, reach through the phone, and beat you with it. Are you nuts? You are are you kidding? And this is not even emotional.
I'm happy I don't have to debate you on this.
Why would you ever get rid of a Gary Sanchez? Are you nuts? He is the beginning. He is the beginning. Just like when the Core 4 started, you would never get rid of a Gary Sanchez. Now you have him for the next 10 years and beyond. Just like when Russell Martin came to the Yankees and they thought he was the beginning, but he was more the middle. And then you had the next wave, which is a Brian McCann. They just found the beginning. They have the Greg Birds. They have the Aaron Judge, and jury's still out on Judge, no pun intended. But you seriously never, I can't even imagine. I think you're just being a contrarian just to oppose CK here to say that you would trade a Gary Sanchez, because you start with the Gary Sanchez, a catcher who's going to hit. Every level that he's been at, he has bombed the ball out of the ballpark. He hits for average. He hits for power. He's got a cannon of an arm that people do not want to run on, that he will lead the major leagues. And you're talking about trading him for, yes, the Yankees definitely need a frontline pitcher, but you would never even think. He is untouchable for the next decade.
I'm completely nuts.
How you doing, CK?
I'm completely nuts. I'll admit that. And the reason I'd trade him, what's more important to you? You mentioned how he teared the cover off the ball all throughout the minor leagues. A 275 hitter based on minor league sample size, or a guy who'll win you 19 games?
There's no guarantee anyone can win 19 games in the major leagues at this point anymore. No guarantee. But remember what I said. This might be the beginning of the next core of players, and he is the pinnacle. He is the guy that you're going to build around. Jury, again, still has to be out on Greg Bird. One good season, tail end of the season, when he was playing with house money. Who's to say that he's going to be the defensive guy that they think he'll be, and definitely the offensive guy it looks like he could be. But he only had, 50 games in the major leagues? I mean, you're starting with one of the best catchers in the major leagues already, and he's not even 100 games into his major league career, and he's already one of the best catchers. Never, never, never.
I'm going to moderate.
Never even think about it.
We're going to bring the Yankees talk to a close.
No, hold on. So I broke the tie here. I broke the tie. So we win, CK.
I guess we win. I also got some tweets saying Kershaw for Sanchez is no-brainer. I don't know what our followers are saying, but whatever. We're going to
Dodgers
hop
would
conversation.
never trade Kershaw.
It's a hypothetical.
Idiotic
Let's
to
talk
think that
Jets.
they would trade Kershaw.
I kind of want to talk Jets because we're running low on time. So Coach Glenn, let's talk Jets. You down for that?
Okay.
All right.
Yes, I am sad to see that Gino finally got his shot. I don't think he's a good quarterback, but when you finally get your shot, and we've all been there, when you sit on the bench and looking over your shoulder and being second-guessed, but then you go down with an ACL, that is terrible news for him.
My question is it time for the Jets to say, okay, our season's over, we're not making the playoffs. Let's think about the future, and let's start playing Bryce Petty or maybe even Christian Hackenberg, because obviously we all know Ryan Fitzpatrick is not the future. When does that question come in?
The answer is yes, a resounding yes. The answer is a resounding yes. Geno Smith was not the answer. He was just a stopgap. Maybe it's a Bryce Petty. Maybe it's next year's draft pick if they tank the season, which it looks like they're going to inadvertently be able to do that. But Ryan Fitzpatrick stinks. He's only been nothing but a journeyman his entire career. Now he's coming out whining that no one supports him. No one supports him because he's not good. Last year was lightning in a bottle. Last year was last year. This year was bumped his head, came back, crashing back down to earth. And the true Ryan Fitzpatrick, what he is a journeyman quarterback who will never have ownership, general managers, and coaches 100% behind him because he's just a journeyman, middling quarterback. You took a shot with Geno. Geno's been sitting on the bench for 3 years at this point, got his jaw ran into by a fist last year, and blew his opportunity, but he wouldn't have been in the answer last year either. But, yeah, they need to cut bait at this point and start looking for their next guy because their season is over at this point.
I'll agree with you. I'd love to see Bryce Petty out there, and I'd love to see what he has to offer. In my opinion, he's the purest quarterback the Jets currently have on their roster when he's active. But I think we need to face reality here. Things tend to work themselves out in sports, and Geno starting last week, although he looked good in the beginning, and I haven't had much faith in Geno ever, I think him getting hurt is basically a way of saying, look what this is. This was a wake-up call for Ryan Fitzpatrick, basically saying this is anyone's job. He walked in here this year trying to demand this contract that the Jets weren't going to give him. They finally came to terms, and he basically showed, I am that journeyman. And that showed him, with them benching him this week for Geno Smith and trying a new face, it's anyone's job to have. And I think he responded against the Baltimore Ravens. And I think with the schedule lighting up, the Jets might run themselves into a couple wins here. Fitzpatrick might look a lot better in the process. And maybe this just opened his eyes and said, hey, this is anyone's job to have. And Bryce Petty's next up if I don't perform.
I mean, I'm just looking at the schedule, and they play the Patriots twice. And even if they split with them, which I don't think will happen, they'd have to win out against the Browns, Dolphins twice, Rams, Colts, 49ers, and then Rex Ryan's Bills in Week 17. But even with Fitzpatrick, there's no way they finish the year 10-6, which might not even be good enough for a wild card spot. So I
no
think
way,
about
but they can finish 8-8.
Yeah, but I think about at this point of the Jets' year, it's about developing the only guy who looks like he could step in as a long-term gunslinger. I know no NFL team this early wants to throw in the towel, but it can't get any worse for how Fitzpatrick has looked.
Yeah, I believe you have to cut bait at this point and try the next. It may not be a guy that's on their roster this year, but at least you have to give it a try. And if anything, I know you don't do a ton of trades in the NFL, but at least maybe worth some trade value to package a guy or something like that. Maybe get another quarterback. Maybe, like everyone's saying, maybe they're going to tank the season and go for a high draft pick and get themselves a better quarterback. They already, kind of did that, and they chose Geno Smith, which was a huge mistake. I didn't think he was that good of a quarterback to begin with. But it's a cut bait. Mm-hmm. It's cut bait. I mean, the schedule makers really had it out for the Jets this year, and you still have to pay the Patriots with Tom Brady 2 more times. That's 2 L's for sure. That's 2 L's for sure. They are not up to the task to beat the Patriots and other divisional foes. But, yeah, it's a cut bait, I believe. Ryan Fitzpatrick is not bringing you anywhere, and I don't think there's anything left you can do with him.
All right, so there are takes on Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Jets' whole situation with Geno Smith, of course, going down with a torn ACL today. We have about 4 minutes left with you on our first ever Around the Apple podcast. Emmanuel Berbari, Christian Kouroupakis is with you. We're, of course, joined by Glenn, who is Christian's former baseball coach and is a sports media professional.
I guess I'm your first-time, long-time guy, right?
First-time, long-time.
Here we go.
First-time, long-time.
We're gonna get to our final topic, and Glenn, we'd be happy if you could stay with us. The World Series starts tomorrow in Cleveland. The Cubs and the Indians, 174 years combined between them as far as droughts are concerned. Let's just give our picks, and we'll say keys to the series for us. Christian, why don't you start?
I'm going Indians in 6 with Francisco Lindor as my MVP. And I just hope they have Charlie Sheen as the Wild Thing with his sideburns come out from the bullpen and throw out the ceremonial first pitch. I just think that the Indians with Andrew Miller in the middle innings is just going to be too much for the Cubs to handle. Once you give the Indians a lead, it's going to be all over. So the key to the game, the key to the series actually, would be Indians just take the early lead and get Andrew Miller in the game.
All right,
who's
Glenn,
next?
do you
Glenn,
have
go
a
ahead.
My pick. CK knows me for a very long time. That's why I'm your first time, long time. I'm kind of a big softie. So in this case, I'd have to pick the Cubs. But my heart of hearts tells me that with Andrew Miller as potent of a reliever and Tito being willing to use their bullpen in any which way to get them to win, I think Indians as well. However, I say it goes a full 7. Because I think the baseball gods have smiled down upon us and brought us 2 franchises who have been locked in a World Series drought for so long that they're going to give us an ultimate fall classic. So I say Indians in 7.
We disagreed on the Gary Sanchez thing, but we definitely agree on this one. I have Cubs in 7. Chris Bryant is my World Series MVP. He's been consistent all postseason, but he's yet to have that real power surge that we're accustomed to seeing him have. I see him going 5 home runs, maybe 6, challenging those World Series records, and it's an epic 7-game clash that the Cubs ultimately come out on top of. That's what I think.
That would be awesome for all us baseball fans. That would be awesome if it went that way.
It would
one
be.
way or another.
I'm telling
Guys,
you,
listen,
I'm really looking forward to this
I know you
series.
have a few seconds left. Thank you so much for inviting me on as your first caller. I'd love to participate whenever you need me. I definitely have opinions that CK knows, but good luck on your show. It sounds like you're off to a resounding great start, and I hope it continues your success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Coach Glenn. I'll see you later.
Talk to you guys later.
Peace. All right. And I just want to say thank you for everyone who listened. Emmanuel, thank you so much for getting this started with me. I'm really looking forward to doing the show every Monday at 4 p.m. Do you have any closing remarks besides we need Kershaw in the Bronx?
Yeah, that's really all my closing remark. Kershaw in the Bronx, Sanchez will be packing his bags if that's the case. But I'm looking forward to the World Series. It's an exciting time in sports. We covered a lot of hot topics today, and we'll see how the Jets go with their quarterback situation moving forward. But overall, it's perfect. And you have the NBA starting up with the Knicks tomorrow. You have the NHL in full swing. It's exciting, and I'm excited for weeks to come.
For those who don't know, the World Series is going to be tomorrow. 8:08 is the first pitch. It'll be on Fox. First game will be in Cleveland. All right, Emmanuel, I'm going to say goodbye, and goodbye to all our listeners. We'll see you next week at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.